everybody, it's Dr. Karen, and I am super excited to pop in this morning and do a quick live stream about really the truth when it comes to starting a business, starting an SLP business, starting a business if you are an SLP. Now, before I get started, I wanted to share that the reason I'm talking a lot about this this week and last week is that next week, Thursday, January, let me look at the date here to make sure I'm telling you the right date. January 16th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I am going to be co-hosting a live event with Jenna Castro-Casbin from the Independent Clinician, and she is going to be talking about what she calls the new way of starting a private practice, how to start a private practice without incurring all kinds of startup costs, without putting yourself at risk, and how to do it in a way that allows you to get clients who are willing to pay premium prices for quality services. So I'm going to drop some links in the comments and share the sign up page. I'll go ahead and do that right now, actually, as I'm talking. But I wanted to segue into the topic of the day, which is, again, all about starting an SLP business, and this one simple strategy that if you aren't familiar with the business literature and if you haven't really looked into the entrepreneurial building a business space, you might not have heard of it before, and it's called bootstrapping. And this is essentially what I've done to start my business and how I've been able to do that without having to invest my life savings in starting a business and put myself at a huge risk, how I've been able to do it gradually and really essentially maintain the same lifestyle and actually kind of upgrade my lifestyle over the course of the last couple of years as I've been able to replace my income. And how I was able to do it without those crazy things that you hear about. Again, I love to use Shark Tank as an example because a lot of times you'll hear examples of people who went all in and started their business and they're living on their friend's couch and they're like, trying to support their family and they haven't taken a salary in 3 years because they're putting all the money into the business and all of those things. And the thing is that a lot of businesses do fail, but if you do it the right way and if you put the right systems in place, it is possible to be successful without all of those, those things that would cause a lot of stress, cause you to really put yourself and your family at risk. So I want to talk a little bit about what bootstrapping is and why it has been so helpful, especially if you're somebody who wants to start a business, wants to go out on your own. Either maybe you are not quite sure exactly of the what and the how, or maybe you have an idea of what you want to do, but the process just seems so overwhelming. You're not quite sure what all needs to be in place. And if you are just wondering, like, how am I going to be able to afford to do all of these things that I have to do? So, for example, if you're wanting to start a private practice, and if you go into an established private practice, they've got this nice office, they've got a staff, they've got all these materials, they've got a regular stream of clients and all of those things. So it can seem pretty overwhelming to figure out, okay, like, do I need to go and rent an office space? And how do I come up with money for that? How do I come up with money for the materials? So what bootstrapping is essentially is that what you're doing, a lot of companies when they start, Amazon is a perfect example. So a lot of companies, especially the really big ones, what they'll do is they'll get funding. They'll have like venture capitalists, again, like the sharks or angel investors, where they'll, and again, because I have not gone that route, I have not gotten investors. I can't go into the details as far as the intricacies, but essentially what they're doing is they're getting funding from different people in order to start their business so that they can pay employees, all those other things that they might have to do in order to start their business. So for example, if you're starting a private practice, that would be like if you want to hire clinicians to work for you, if you want to hire an office manager, if you want to rent an office space, those would be the types of things that in theory, eventually at some point could be things that you would have to pay for. What people do is if they are a funded company or if they're getting funding from somebody, they will, again, get somebody to front the money for a portion of the company. It's different if it's a venture capitalist versus an angel investor. I'm not going to get into that stuff today, but essentially what you're doing is that you have to figure out how to get this big chunk of money to invest in those things if you are going to go that route. So what companies like Amazon have done is with their business model, they've managed to like set up their business in a way that like for years they were not profitable. Like I can't even remember what it is for Amazon, but it was like 10 years or something like that. And the thing is that if you are a small business owner and you want to start serving clients right away, you can't really do that because you have a family to feed and you don't have all of this funding available to you. And so a lot of times what people will try to do if they're a small business owner is that they might try to like save up all this money and just dump all of it into their business. And the thing is that, again, it's very risky. So what you want to do is get out of that mindset of like, I have to do all of this stuff. And you want to get into more of the bootstrapping mindset, because a lot of us aren't like Jeff Bezos, who could figure out how to have this company that isn't profitable for 10 years. Like if you were thinking about starting a private practice, you want to probably figure out how to transition to that, or whether you want it to be an on the side thing on top of your regular job, or whether you want it to be something that you transition to doing full time. So you probably want to start making money before 10 years if you are an SLP that wants to be a private practitioner and start your own business. So what bootstrapping is basically you get some money, like the amount that you can front at the time, and you invest a little bit in your business. So instead of taking this huge chunk and going all in and doing all of this stuff at once, you invest a little bit and do a little bit at a time, and then you find a way to actually start making money as soon as possible. So instead of coming up with this perfect office or, this huge infrastructure for your business and trying to have it this perfect thing all set up, you just are simply doing a little bit at a time. So you get some money and you invest in a little bit, and then you start making some money. Because you're using that money that you had to start making money right away, start working with clients, start selling something right away. And then over time, you're building up. So you're making a little money, you're investing it and putting it back in. And you're doing that over time. And so what eventually happens is that you might have started out with like a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 that you invested and then made back. And ideally, if you are able to successfully start finding clients, start selling services, the amount of money that you're making should be more than the amount that you're investing back in. So what happens is that you invest a little bit, you make a little bit more, and you invest it back in. So the amount that you're making back is more every time, so that money that you're able to put back into the business gets more and more, so you're able to afford more and more for your business. So that means that at the beginning, if with the private practice example, I'll give you a couple examples. I'll tell you kind of what I did and what sometimes people will do if they're starting a private practice is, and I did this when I was seeing private clients as well, is that it's like, okay, I don't want to have this huge brick and mortar space. I don't want to open up this huge clinic yet, even though that might be where you want to go eventually. And so what you can do is it's like, okay, what do I need right now to start seeing clients? Like, what do if I had somebody who was like, do you see clients for private therapy? And I wanted to get up and running next week, how could I make that happen? And you might think you have to do all of this stuff. You don't. There's a couple things that you do need to do, but you don't need to make it this huge ordeal. So what you could do initially, like what my initial startup costs were, is that I did register my business. That was a couple $100, like locally, to get your business name. You don't technically have to do that. I could have just started seeing them under my name, like just under Karen Dudek-Brannan, but I decided I wanted to register under a business name. But I didn't necessarily have to do that. And I also needed to make sure that I had whatever materials that I needed in order to go work with that client. And I was able to borrow them from people locally. I had some materials that I had bought because I was working in the school at the time that were mine, that I was like, well, I can borrow these. Like, even though I bought them for my school position, I can borrow these and use these. So I borrowed things from people. There's like local clinics and school district, and that's how I got my materials initially. And then I made sure that I had professional liability insurance. So that was like a couple $100 that I had to invest in order to start seeing clients. And so, if you're charging what you're worth, that should just be, you should be able to make that up in a couple sessions. I also invested in Jenna Castro-Casbin's book, where she talks about how to start a private practice and your website. And obviously she's expanded that into a course now. It's much more in depth. The system is way more sophisticated. She's helped thousands of other SLPs start private practices since then. But again, I initially invested in some of her resources, and that was something that, again, I made that money back because it was something that helped me to start seeing clients. And so what people essentially do is, once they've started seeing clients, and you can see them you can travel to them. You can sometimes, if you don't want to start your own clinic space, you might be able to rent a room in an office, which is a little bit less expensive than opening your entire office, like having the entire place to yourself. I had a friend in town who was a music therapist who had a little room that I could have used. I didn't actually end up doing it, but that would have been a lot less expensive than me trying to open up my own office. So essentially that's what I did. And that's what a lot of people do, is that they'll start seeing clients on the side. And during that time, what they're doing is they're building up their referral network so that they know that they're getting referrals. They are maybe seeing clients in their houses. And that way they're starting to make money. And if they do that on the side of their full-time job, they have some income coming in so that they're not dependent on the private practice for 100% of their income. And what they can do is build it up enough and build the systems and the strategies and kind of put the structure in place to get referrals just from that initial small investment. And then that way it's like, okay, I've put this little bit of money in, I've made some money. Now I have a little bit more saved up. And so when I make the next investment into my business, I have more. And so that's what people do. And again, that's called bootstrapping, where you're essentially investing little bits of money over time, making a little bit money, putting it back in, etc. How it worked for me, with an online business, with creating courses online, the structure and the model was a little bit different, but it was the same concept, where it was like, all right, I'm going to save up this amount that I'm comfortable, with possibly losing if it doesn't work out. Which again, sometimes that happened where it was like, okay, I invested this. It wasn't a great investment, but over time, as I kept going, there was a good return. But what I would do is some of the things that I had to get up and running before I could start selling anything was my website. I invested a lot of time creating my blog, things like that. I have an online course dashboard that's, again, software programs that I had to pay for that were kind of costs of running the business. Those were probably the things that I needed right away. It was like, if I don't have a place to house my course and accept payments and things like that, then obviously I won't ever make anything. So I had to have those things set up in advance before I made money. So those were some of my startup costs. And then also I did invest a lot in courses and trainings to show me how to set that up. So I would say that probably the the biggest investment up front for me was just my own professional development and learning how to do this. Now, some people like to DIY it and piece it together with YouTube videos. I thought, yeah, I can figure this out myself. And after about 6 weeks of doing that, I was like, screw it. I'm going to go and learn from somebody who knows how to do it. And that fast tracked me. And it was well worth it to learn from somebody who actually knew what they were doing, that had been there. I even tried to do, like, they have those online courses you can get that are relatively inexpensive, like on Udemy or Coursera. But I found that those were just not specific enough. What I found was the biggest ROI was investing a little bit more in someone who had done something very specific to what I was doing. Perfect example, there's a lot of like generic consulting courses out there about like setting up a business, nuts and bolts things, but a lot of times they don't get what it's like in being an SLP. So I found Jenna's resources a lot more useful in starting a private practice, because she is a person who has actually started a private practice multiple times and helped tons of different people do the same. So that information obviously got me a lot further than something that was kind of generic freelancing, consulting, business type of stuff. So to me, I found it was a much better investment there. So those are the types of things that you're going to want to think about. And again, you want to keep that mindset of bootstrapping and doing a little bit at a time. And rather than feeling like you've got to go all in. Now, of course, if you're at the point where you've got a lot saved up, you're in a situation where you're not dependent on your income and you can leave your job and go all in, then by all means, that's awesome. Do it. Obviously, going full time at something, sometimes that can make it put you in a situation where you are going to be able to build it up faster. That's not necessarily always the case, though, because a lot of times I found that if people aren't dependent on that income, then there's not that motivation, like, I really want to get this to work. If they are dependent on that income, then a lot of times kind of lights a fire under people where they're like, all right, I'm going to grow this, I'm going to make it work. And so they're put into a situation where they have to make it work. That can be a lot more motivating. But I've also found that you want to have that level of motivation, and again, that kind of fire under you to like not be in such a cushy situation that you're not motivated to do the work. But I found that a lot of people are, if they put themselves in a situation that's too stressful and risky, that's when they start getting desperate and making really poor decisions. So those people who say like burn all boats and you've got to go all in, that's not necessarily true. If you've got a personality where you like things that are super risky and like fast paced all the time, then yeah, that might work for you. But it also, there's been a lot of people who have been able to build successful businesses by having this other source of income to take the pressure and the stress off, so that they're free to make good decisions about their business because they're not freaking out about how they're going to pay their bills. So doing it gradually on the side and bootstrapping, as opposed to going all in at once and doing this, building this huge infrastructure right away, is a way that you can do that and reduce some of that risk for you. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the training that's coming up next week, because Jenna is going to dive further into how to do this for a private practice specifically. Again, she has helped over 7,000 SLPs in the last 12 years start private practices in all different areas of specialization, all different kinds of business models, whether it be people who just see clients in their homes, people who have started and built up brick and mortar practices, people who have hired clinicians, people who have a bunch of different contractors that or actually started contract companies that provide early intervention services. So number of different models and areas of specialization. And she's going to talk about how to start your private practice in a way that allows you to minimize your risk, allows you to market yourself to your ideal dream clients, people who are actually willing to pay premium amounts for your services and how you can get that steady stream of clients flowing in and really create your dream job and your dream situation. So again, I shared that link in the comments. The training is called How to Start a Private Practice Full-Time or on the Side, even if you have no idea how to get started. So again, she's going to talk about how you can do it, whether you are wanting to just go all in and do it full-time, or whether you're wanting to start it up and build it up on the side. So if either of those situations apply to you, then put this training on your calendar. Again, January 16th, Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be co-hosting the event, and she's going to be diving into all these things. So thank you so much for listening this morning, and I hope to see you next week on the training.